A female ranger and her loyal German shepherd rush to a veterinary clinic in urgent need of help. When the vet refuses to treat them, no one expects this to be the turning point that changes everything. As the story unfolds, the truth about the dog, not just a companion, but a silent hero who has saved many lives, including the vet's own, is revealed. Will the vet realize the mistake made in judgment? Follow this emotional and surprising story, where loyalty and sacrifice of a four-legged friend are honored. Brimridge hadn't changed much. It remained a small town nestled between ancient pine forests, with its slanted wooden houses hidden behind morning mist, and the dirt road paved with cobblestones leading from the highway to the town center still full of potholes, just like the day she left. But in Senna Vale's heart, everything had quietly collapsed a long time ago. The old pickup truck rolled slowly into town at dawn. On the passenger seat, Eric, a German shepherd with a coat of salt and pepper gray, rested his head on a fabric bag. He wasn't sleeping, just dozing. Every time the wheels hit a pothole, Eric would open his eyes, glance at Senna, then close them again, as if it were a protective habit that no longer felt necessary but still lingered in his blood. Senna pulled the truck over beside the old wooden sign reading, "Welcome to Brimridge." Its letters faded over time. She stepped out, stretching her back and tilting her head to inhale the familiar air, the scent of pine resin, the damp earth from the night's rain, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of a small stream behind the hill. This feeling, once everything to her. The door on the other side of the truck creaked open. Eric stepped down gently, though his legs were a little stiff with age. He walked slowly, head held high, breathing in the air as if he too were trying to remember something familiar. "We're back, old friend," Senna whispered, gently stroking the back of Eric's neck. They didn't need many words. Over 7 years of working together in mountain rescue missions, hundreds of hours spent together amidst dust, mud, and rubble had created a silent language between them. When Senna filed her discharge papers, no one asked why. Because everyone knew. The death of the last child they couldn't save was a wound that she carried in her heart, one that wouldn't easily heal. And then, she disappeared. No address, no social media, only Eirik, still following her like a shadow. The roadside cafe with its curved awning and faded sign was the first place they stopped. The elderly woman who ran the cafe hadn't changed, her silver hair tied in a bun and the familiar striped apron. When she saw Senna walk in, she paused. "Back again, Forest Ranger?" she asked, her voice slow, as if uncertain she recognized the person before her. Senna nodded, smiling. "I've come back to find some peace." The woman glanced down at Eric. "This dog looks familiar?" "Eric," Senna said, gently rubbing his back. "He still remembers the way home." The woman didn't say anything more. She simply poured Senna a cup of black coffee and placed a small plate with a slice of ham beside Eric. For the hero, no one mentioned the past, but the atmosphere was enough for both sides to understand. Some pains don't need to be spoken of, but are still respected in silence. Senna and Eric chose to live in an old wooden cabin by the forest, once a resting point for forest rangers. The roof had been replaced with new tin, the windows had been refitted with glass, and the wood stove still worked if you were careful. She bought it with her savings from all those years, paying without haggling. For her, this space was a remedy more powerful than any therapy. Every morning they walked along the dirt path that led into the forest, where the tall pine trees seemed to touch the sky. Eric, though no longer as agile as before, still patiently walked step by step, his ears always facing outward, as though he were still on duty. On days with a light breeze, Senna often carried a small notebook. She sketched, not fine art, just rough lines of branches, shadows, and occasionally the shape of Eirik lying sideways on the grass, his chest rising and falling in rhythm with his steady breathing. In the afternoon, she turned on the old radio to listen to the weather forecast, the static warmth filling the wooden cabin. Eirik liked to lie beneath her chair, near the stove, and let out a long yawn whenever the announcer mentioned the nighttime temperature dropping. Brimridge quietly welcomed Senna back, as if the forest had returned from its winter sleep. There were no crowds, no welcome banners, just a natural acceptance, as if she and Eirik had never left. Occasionally someone would stop by, bringing a bag of dog food or just to ask, "Are you still taking scent trails, Miss Vale?" Senna would smile and shake her head gently. "I just listen to the wind now." But in her heart, she knew. There were traces you could never turn away from. And some hearts, though worn out, are still sensitive to the call of the forest. Eirik knew this too. Every time he heard the rescue vehicle siren from town, his ears would twitch and his eyes would turn toward the window. And when that gaze met Senna's, they didn't need to say anything. They only needed to wait. Then, one foggy morning, something happened in the northern forest. A child went missing. The search team was dispatched. But the scent was faint, the muddy trails uncertain. No one dared to be sure. Senna stood on the wooden porch, a steaming cup of tea in her hand. Eirik lay at her feet, his eyes still open. The siren echoed from far away, long, slow, like a call from an old past. Senna looked down at Eirik. "Shall we go again?" He didn't bark. He simply stood, shook himself slightly. Brimridge entered the season change with an unusually rainy night. The raindrops hit the tin roof in uneven beats, like an unsung ancient melody. The wind from the northern pines brought the scent of damp earth and the clattering sound of branches knocking together. Inside the small cabin, Senna still sat by the stove. The fire crackled softly, warm but not enough to chase away the tension that silently crept into the space. The urgent news broadcast echoed through the radio. A 6-year-old girl, Adeline Frey, is believed to have left her home at 4 p.m. and has not returned. The family found the back gate open and small footprints leading into the North Forest. The local rescue team has been mobilized. Senna set her cup of tea down. Eirik lifted his head as soon as the broadcaster's tone shifted. Despite his age, his ears remained as sharp as they had been when he was on the front lines. Senna didn't look at him, but she felt that gaze, that of a comrade waiting for orders. No one asked. There were no sirens blaring. But something stirred inside Senna, silently yet urgently. She stood up, threw on her faded raincoat, packed her first aid kit, and stuffed a flashlight into a small backpack. Eirik stretched, walking over to the door. He didn't need to be called. The North Forest of Brimridge in the rain was nothing like it was during the day. The trail had become slippery, the fallen leaves covered the footprints, and the mist settled into thin layers on the branches above. But Senna knew the forest. She trusted her instincts. More importantly, she trusted Eirik. At the rally point, the rescue team had arrived. The reflective jackets gleamed under the headlights, voices mixed with the crackling of walkie-talkies. A man, the team leader, saw Senna and walked over, his gaze uncomfortable. "Senna, I didn't expect you to come." "A 6-year-old girl, and with this rain," Senna replied, her voice steady, her eyes focused on the forest. "You're not with the unit anymore. I'm afraid." "No need to register. I'm going alone. Won't interfere with the procedure." The leader hesitated to say something, but stopped himself. He nodded slightly, his gaze falling on Eirik, the dog standing tall, head raised, eyes as clear as a guiding light. No one objected, because on nights like this, What they needed wasn't rank. It was hope. Senna and Eric separated from the main group, heading towards the eastern slope, the forest deeper there, but with a higher chance of leaving traces, as fewer people passed through. She switched on her flashlight, the faint yellow beam lighting up the mist, turning everything ahead into a hazy, pencil-drawn image. Eric led the way, his nose close to the ground. Occasionally, he stopped for a few seconds, then changed direction. He didn't bark, didn't rush. He walked steadily, as if he had been programmed to find life in the darkest places. Senna followed silently, her heart both calm and heavy. The wind picked up as they reached the lower forest near the stream. The leaves rustled. A few small branches slapped against her shoulders as the wind blew back at her. But she didn't stop. Suddenly, Eric halted, his eyes locked onto a low bush. Senna understood that signal. He had found something. She crouched, gently brushing away the leaves. A small, muddy pink child's shoe sat precariously at the edge of the tree roots. Nearby, there were small, fresh footprints. Senna said nothing, but her hand tightened around the flashlight. Eric turned to look at her. They both knew. Time was running out. From afar, the walkie-talkie crackled. "The west side hasn't found anything yet. No sign. The temperature is dropping." Senna kept her steps steady. The wind howled louder. But Eric didn't falter. His eyes glowed with absolute focus, part instinct, part responsibility. On the way, Senna noticed a few branches broken unnaturally. The child might have tried to squeeze through this way in panic. That meant she was still conscious, at least up until that point. She knelt, touching the damp earth. The temperature was beginning to drop. If they didn't find her soon, the little girl could suffer from hypothermia. Eric suddenly veered left, taking a path Senna had never walked before. The flashlight illuminated the narrow trail covered in fallen leaves. She followed, each step careful. The deeper they went, the weaker the wind became. The thick trees shielded them, creating a windless pocket. And there, Eric stopped. He turned his head, barking softly. Senna quickened her pace. Beneath a low tree, she saw a small figure huddled, trembling. The girl's coat was soaked through, her hair matted against her forehead. Her eyes were wide with fear, but still bright. Senna slowly bent down, touching the girl's shoulder. "Adeline?" The child didn't speak, just nodded faintly. Eric moved closer, lying down beside her like a living blanket. He stretched, using his back to block the wind. Senna opened her bag, pulled out an emergency blanket, and called in on the walkie-talkie. Her voice was calm but shaking with emotion. "I've found her. The girl is still conscious, needs medical assistance at the low stream point to the east." On the way back, Eric stayed by the girl's side, silent but steady. The girl occasionally glanced at him, her hand resting gently on his neck, like holding onto a lifeline leading her home. By dawn, as the mist hadn't fully cleared, the rescue team saw Senna and Eric bringing the girl back to the rally point. Senna didn't say anything further. She placed a hand on Eric's back, gently stroking him once. He looked at her, and together they turned and walked back into the forest, where they belonged. After Adeline was safely taken back, the morning light pierced through the gray clouds of Brimridge, bringing a warmth unlike any other day. But in Senna's heart, something still lingered uneasily. The girl had muttered, wrapped in the blanket, about a strange uncle who often gave her candy through the forest fence. That sentence fell into Senna's ears like a distant signal, unclear but impossible to ignore. Senna and Eric rested for a few hours before heading back into the forest, this time not on request or mission, but because of the instinct of one who could read what maps could not. The forest today seemed to have shed its skin after the rain. More leaves had fallen, covering the ground in a wet, slippery carpet. Light filtered through the branches, casting beams that crisscrossed like golden threads in the air. Eric walked ahead, his stride calm, head low, occasionally pausing to sniff the base of a tree. Senna walked slowly behind him, her eyes not only following him but also listening. The unfamiliar calls of birds, the faint snap of a twig, or the different breath of the wind. Then Eric changed direction, suddenly but naturally, and moved toward the broken rock face where a landslide had occurred 3 years ago. This area wasn't on the main patrol route. The earth and rocks had once spilled down, washing away part of the trail. Since then, the area had been off-limits due to the steep incline, weak ground, and no clear way out. But Eric didn't hesitate. He slowly navigated through moss-covered rocks, sniffing each step as if retracing a faint memory. Senna followed, a familiar feeling rising within her. The feeling when you're unsure if you're on the right path, but you continue because your companion believes in it. At a fallen tree blocking the way, Eric stopped. He didn't bark. He simply sat and looked toward the other side, with eyes not of a dog waiting for orders, but of one leading the way. Senna gently pushed the branches aside, stepping around them, and then she saw it. Among the tangled brush, a faint scent trail. Very faint, but Eric could sense it. A pale pink smear remained on the rock, a trace of gummy candy or perhaps a torn candy wrapper. The wind blew in the opposite direction, causing the scent to scatter. But Eric still picked it up. He began moving slower, sniffing the ground closely. Senna followed, memorizing the path. Eric understood. They had done this hundreds of times. Led by the fragmented scents, Eric took her to a narrow path by the rocks, nearly concealed by the wild bushes. Below them was a deep ravine. The land once collapsed like a giant mouth. But at the edge of the ravine, there were a few small footprints, not round, and even like those of an adult, but off-center, as if a child had once hurriedly passed through. Senna crouched, touching the imprints. The earth was dry but still faintly pressed. She looked down at the bottom of the ravine, then at Eric. He didn't bark, just stood there, silent. "Can you smell anything else?" she asked, her hand resting on his back. Eric tilted his head, then, suddenly, leaned to the left, where a bush had been broken. And right beneath it, a glimmer of something orange under the sunlight, a child's orange hair tie. Senna gently picked it up. In that moment, her hand trembled, not from the cold, but because a hypothesis was becoming clearer. Adeline might not have wandered off by herself, and if that was the case, there would be many more things yet to be uncovered. She turned to Eric. The dog had sat down, eyes still focused on the ravine, unwavering. Senna exhaled, slow and deep. The air here felt different, heavier, thicker, like it carried a secret. But at the same time, in the light filtering through the leaves, she saw something quieter, a chance to make things right. "We'll go back," Senna whispered. Eric wagged his tail once, light but certain. Senna placed the hair tie into her pocket, then stood. They turned around, leaving the ravine as the sun began to rise higher. The sound of dry leaves underfoot formed a steady rhythm. No rush, no panic, only quiet trust leading them forward. The sunlight began to fade as Senna and Eric made their way back through the rocky ravine. The last streaks of daylight fell through the cracks in the leaves, resting on the moist ground like fragments of shattered glass, shimmering but unstable. Senna kept thinking about the orange hair tie in her pocket. Her hand occasionally brushed against it, a silent reminder that what they found today wasn't the end, but the beginning of a bigger question. Eric walked ahead, careful but unflinching. He still sniffed the air and traced the trail with the sharpness that had made him a seasoned canine. Every time he paused, Senna stopped too. They understood each other without words. When they reached a narrow, rocky slope leading down into the ravine, Senna motioned for a stop to check for stability. But Eirik, perhaps having sniffed something, moved forward quickly. A sharp clack echoed, cold and familiar. Before Senna could react, Eirik let out a painful cry, and sound that seemed to freeze the forest in a single breath. She rushed forward. Before her eyes was a sight that made her heart tighten. Eric's left hind leg was caught in a crude, rusted animal trap. An old, forgotten device, its sharp metal teeth still as dangerous as a knife. "No, not now," Senna whispered, her voice caught in her throat. Eirik lay on his side, trying not to struggle to avoid worsening the injury. His eyes remained open, but his breathing began to quicken. Senna pulled off her backpack, grabbing a knife and leather gloves, quickly clearing the rocks around the trap. She used all her strength to release the locking mechanism. It took 3 tries before she heard the sharp click. The trap snapped open. She pulled Eric's foot out, blood pouring down her hand. But the dog didn't whimper, only trembling slightly. Not from pain, but from the effort to endure. It's okay. I'm here," Senna whispered, her hands swiftly wrapping a bandage around the wound. She pressed a gauze pad against the blood, squeezing to stop the bleeding temporarily. But the blood kept flowing. In the fading light of the day, Senna's face was cast in shadow beneath the brim of her hat, but her eyes were clear, unwavering. She knew they were deep in the forest. The radio signal was unstable. There was no road access, but Senna wouldn't allow herself to panic. She had been in worse places, with less hope. Eirik looked up at her. His gaze, though pained, was still bright, as if to say, "I trust you, just like always." Senna removed her outer jacket, laid it on the ground, and gently helped Eirik lie down. She let his head rest on her leg, her hand still applying pressure to the bandage. The air was growing colder. The forest wind swept through the trees, carrying moisture and the scent of damp moss. The silence around them grew strangely thick, like the entire forest was holding its breath. Senna softly began to sing. Not loud, just enough for Eirik to hear. A line of a song she had once sung to him after each mission. "You did good, old boy. Just rest." Each word, each note, seemed to fill the air with something gentle and warm. And in that moment, time seemed to stand still. Eirik closed his eyes, his breathing gradually becoming steadier, though his heartbeat was still weak. Senna knew she had to get him back quickly. But night had fallen, the path was slippery, and the danger was real. A single hasty move could ruin everything. So she decided to stay here, through the night, building a makeshift shelter with jackets, a blanket, and some dry branches. She started a fire with flint and some tinder she had with her. The flames danced, casting shadows that highlighted the mud on her cheek, the red glow reflecting in Eirik's eyes. Senna sat beside the dog, her hand still gently resting on the blood-soaked bandage. She didn't speak anymore, but in her heart she made a promise. "Tomorrow, no matter what, I'll get you back, and there, in the forest night, where the howls of the wind no longer frightened anyone, Senna and Eirik lay beside each other, not as human and dog, but as 2 beings who had weathered hundreds of storms and still held on to each other to continue. Above, the stars slowly began to emerge through the thin clouds. Their weak light didn't banish the darkness, but it was enough to guide a promise that was taking shape. Senna awoke when the first light of dawn filtered through the canopy, casting warm, gentle streaks across the ground. Eirik was still lying quietly on the jacket laid beneath him, his breath steady, eyes closed lightly, as if he were sleeping deeply in the sacred forest. She carefully checked the bandage wrapped around his leg. The wound hadn't fully stopped bleeding, but it hadn't gotten worse compared to last night. That was the only thing that made her feel less anxious. Senna knew they couldn't stay here much longer. There was no food, no help nearby. Above all, the rain could return at any moment. The forest night, even with a fire, always carried danger. She gently lifted Eric, sighing. The old dog couldn't stand for long, but he obediently leaned on her, as if knowing this was the time to rely on her. Senna wrapped her arms around him, resting his weight on her shoulder, then braced herself on her thighs, preparing for the hardest journey of her life. The road back to town was nearly 7 kilometers long. Senna had walked many forest paths, but never like this, carrying a dog who was both hurt and heavy, while she too was exhausted from the wound and sleepless nights. Step by step, Senna moved forward. The ground beneath her was wet and slippery, pebbles lodged under the soft earth. Each step was a challenge, every slip a reminder of the frailty of the body. But she wouldn't allow herself to stop. The forest wind blew through the leaves, carrying the smell of wet grass and faint wood smoke, the familiar scent she remembered when she was a young ranger. The fragrance was like a lifeline in the vast sea of fatigue and fear. Eric occasionally lifted his head, glancing at her with grateful eyes. He couldn't speak, but Senna read that trust in every glance, in every steady breath. Senna's legs began to bleed, deep scratches forming from the thorns and sharp rocks, but she no longer felt the pain as much as before. The physical pain was overshadowed by the will to not fall. As she walked, she thought back to the days with Eric, searching for the missing, facing storms, cold snow, and dangers lurking everywhere. But never had she felt so alone as she did now. Alone, but not hopeless. For beside her was the greatest companion, a companion who would never abandon her. Her legs grew weary, each step needing more strength to lift, to avoid stumbling. But Senna gritted her teeth and pressed on. She thought of Adeline's family, of the people in the town waiting for good news, of the trusting eyes. Thinking of that, she felt a new strength surge within her, a strength of resolve and hope. As the sky began to brighten, the sun peeking through the low clouds, the forest bathed in golden light, Senna knew the town wasn't far. She counted each step quietly, feeling a gentle, warm joy like the morning sun. Suddenly, in the distance, the dim lights of a few houses appeared, the distant sound of birds singing and the rooster crowing, a symphony welcoming the new day. Eric lifted his head slightly, wagging his tail weakly, as if sensing the warmth of life and safety. Senna smiled a tired but happy smile. They had made it through the long night, through pain and exhaustion. The way home was near, and she knew the road ahead, still full of challenges, but with Eric by her side, she would never be alone. Senna walked on, her gaze lifted to the sky, which was gradually brightening. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the gaps in the leaves, casting shimmering streaks on the ground like golden threads. In that light, a new spark of hope flickered. Senna quickened her pace as she entered the center of Brimridge, the morning sun having already burned away the fog. Despite her exhaustion and weariness, she still held Eric tightly in her arms, her hand trembling from old wounds mingling with fatigue. The small town center appeared before her, wooden houses clustered together, a grocery store, a roadside cafe, and, finally, the small building with the sign Dr. Mael Orvan's Veterinary Clinic, the place where Senna placed her final hope for Eric's survival. Senna pushed the glass door open, and the air inside immediately shifted. The space was clean and neat, yet there was a cold distance. The white-painted walls reflected the daylight, giving the room a solemn, almost hospital-like atmosphere. Behind the reception desk stood a young woman with a calm expression, her name tag reading Heather. She looked Senna up and down, her gaze lingering on the worn-out uniform before settling on the dog in Senna's arms. "Hello, how can I help you?" Heather asked, her tone professional but cold. Senna gently set Eric down on the floor. The old dog trembled slightly, took a few steps, then lay down. His eyes met Senna's, silently conveying strength, reminding her that they still had to fight together. "I need the doctor to look at this dog," Senna said, her voice soft but firm. "He's badly hurt. I don't have much money, but I'll pay every cent I can." Heather quickly scanned some papers on her computer, then replied indifferently, "We require payment before treatment. It's our clinic's policy. No money, no service." The atmosphere in the room grew tense. Senna glanced around, seeing the other waiting patients. Their eyes weren't offering empathy, just indifferent stares. A few people quietly avoided her gaze. Eric held his breath, his eyes growing dull from fatigue and pain. He shifted slightly, then lay still. Senna bent down, gently stroking his weathered coat, offering a wordless comfort. In that moment, Senna felt the isolation, not just in the deep forest, but right here, in the heart of this small town. A cold world she had thought she had left behind. But then, from outside the waiting room, the wind from the season brushed against the window, making a few papers rustle. The morning light filtered through the glass, bathing the wooden floor in a soft, golden hue. Senna's gaze grew more determined. "You can't give up." "Neither can I," she whispered in Eric's ear. Suddenly, a door opened. A middle-aged man stepped in, his coat stained with mud and scratches on his sleeves. His eyes were filled with understanding. "Senna, is that you?" he asked, his voice full of sincerity and a hint of surprise. Senna looked up. The man was Dane Halbrook, a former colleague from her old rescue missions. He glanced at Eric, his eyes revealing his concern. "I heard you were back and saw you needed help." The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. All eyes turned toward Dane, and the air suddenly felt warmer. Senna felt a surge of strength. Eric, too, seemed to sense it, wagging his tail weakly, lifting his head just a little higher. Heather, noticing the change in the atmosphere, paused, as if realizing something beyond her initial judgment. Dane moved closer, knelt down next to Eric, and sighed. "This dog is no ordinary pet. He was a hero, and so was Senna." Senna thanked Dane with a slight nod. She knew that, even though there were many challenges ahead, she wasn't alone anymore. Her gaze brightened, the light of faith and hope shining through. She bent down, gently patting Eric's back. "We won't stop. Not now." Under the soft light of the morning, the small room seemed a little warmer, and though no one spoke, Senna knew. The change had begun. Sitting by the counter, the others in the waiting room remained quiet. But their gazes were no longer cold, as if they were now remembering the story that Senna and Eric were writing with every step, every breath. The sky over Brimridge darkened as clouds rolled in from the western mountains. The wind began to howl, bringing a cold rain that poured down like a deluge, pounding the roof and the treetops, creating a haunting melody interspersed with the distant rumble of thunder. Senna sat by the window, her fingers tapping out a text message on her old phone as her eyes remained fixed on the stormy night in the forest. She remembered every second that had passed, the fragile line between life and death that she and Eric had faced together. Beside her, in the makeshift cage in the corner of the room, Eric lay. His breathing was labored, his coat still damp in places, the wound on his leg still oozing blood. But the most remarkable thing was, despite being exhausted, he still tried to bark, a weak but determined sound. Senna silently approached the cage, bent down, and gently placed her hand on his head. She whispered, "We've crossed cold streams, harsh winds, and perilous cliffs. You won't fall here, Eric. Not now, not ever." The sound of rain outside continued unabated. The faint light from the small oil lamp on the table created a warm glow in the cold room, where Senna and Eric shared a peaceful moment after their long battle. In recent days, Senna hadn't slept much. She kept a close watch on every sign from Eric's body, every breath, every tiny movement. She knew he wasn't just a dog. He was her friend, her fiercest companion, an inseparable part of her life. Her voice echoed softly in the stillness of the room. "You're my hero, Eric, and you will heal." Eric responded with a tender gaze and a gentle lick on her hand. Despite his pain, he still showed absolute trust. The rain outside began to grow fiercer. The wind carried large raindrops that slammed against the window, leaving long streaks of water trailing down like silent tears of nature. Senna stood up, pulling the curtain shut to block the rain. She turned to face Eric, her eyes filled with determination. She thought back to the early days when she first met him, when Eric was a strong, agile K9. The battles, the rescues in the treacherous mountains, those experiences had forged an unbreakable bond between them. Now, as he grew older and wounded, Senna couldn't let him fall. She promised herself she would do whatever it took to keep him alive, to keep them fighting together. The light in the room radiated warmth, wrapping the two of them, human and dog, like a comforting blanket amid the storm. In that moment, no matter how many challenges lay ahead, Senna believed that as long as they were together, nothing could break them. Eric barked softly again, his bark like a vow between two souls. Senna smiled, gently patting his head. "We'll win. Together." Time passed, and the sound of the rain and wind still rumbled outside, but inside the small room, there was another light, the light of love, trust, and survival. Senna sat down, placing her hand on Eric's cage, her heart filled with hope. She knew their fight wasn't over, and tomorrow would bring a new challenge. But tonight, she allowed herself a brief rest, gathering strength for the difficult journey ahead. On the window frame, the rain began to ease, each drop flowing into a stream, creating blurry watercolors. Senna looked toward the deep forest, where countless mysteries still awaited discovery. The afternoon sky was covered with a thin layer of mist as Senna and Eric stepped into the small veterinary clinic in Brimridge. Eric's health was showing signs of improvement, though the injury still caused him pain. Senna felt a quiet comfort as she saw the old dog sitting quietly beside her, his eyes still bright and full of life, though not as agile as he once was. The clinic remained calm, the warm yellow lights soothing the scars in Senna's heart. She sat next to Eric, silently reflecting on the life she had chosen. This life, with its constant challenges, but also filled with life. Suddenly, a loud noise came from outside the door, causing everyone in the room to turn. A group of people entered, backpacks on their shoulders, dressed in thick technical coats, their faces determined, with traces of forest rain still clinging to their hair. "We're looking for a K9, the leader of the group said, his voice urgent yet professional. "The dog might be able to sniff out survivors buried under the rubble from the landslide on the east side." Senna looked at the rescue team with a mixture of curiosity and hope. Instinctively, she felt her heart beat faster. It was a sign that nothing was truly by chance. A younger, quicker member of the team paused, his eyes landing on Eirik before breaking into a gentle smile. "That's our dog," he whispered. "Eirik." Senna felt a jolt run down her spine. This old dog wasn't just her companion, but also a crucial part of the rescue missions the team was carrying out. The team leader, Joran, approached Senna and said, "We lost track of an important K9 during yesterday's search. He was injured, and we suspect he might be here." Senna responded, "Eirik has been injured, but I've been taking care of him. He still has the strength to fight." Another member of the team, Lena, gently crouched down and stroked Eirik. "Such a resilient dog. I've heard stories of his heroics during past missions." Senna felt warmth spread through her chest as she heard these words. Eirik wasn't just an old dog. He was a warrior who had fought tirelessly for human lives. Joran looked at Senna with admiration in his eyes. "We're so glad to see he's still alive, and so glad to meet the one who's cared for him." The rain outside began to fall more gently, each drop softly tapping against the window, like whispered words from the ancient forest, reminding that nature still watched over and protected all that happened. Senna stood up, her eyes full of resolve. "We have a lot of work to do. He needs to be fully treated, and we need to rescue the people still trapped out there." Joran nodded. "We really need your help, not just for Eirik, but for all the missing people." Senna looked at Eirik, then turned to the rescue team. She felt the strength of unity, of humans and animals alike working toward the same goal, saving lives, protecting, and leaving no one behind. The air in the clinic warmed, even though the rain still fell outside. The looks exchanged were no longer strangers, but a connection, a rekindled trust. Eirik barked softly once more, his bark like a vow for the challenges ahead. Senna whispered in his ear, "We'll win. Together." The sound of the rain outside blended with Eirik's bark, filling the space with a symphony of hope and life, opening a new chapter for the journey ahead. The small clinic in Brimridge became livelier as the rescue team and Senna prepared for the next steps in the mission to find the missing. Though the rain continued to pour outside, inside the room, the atmosphere was filled with life, trust, and unity. Among the rescue team, there was a young man, tall with bright eyes, named Ilan. He couldn't take his eyes off Eirik, the old dog still lying quietly in the small cage, tired, but his eyes still filled with vitality and determination. Ilan approached Senna, his voice trembling with emotion. "Are you sure it's Eirik? I remember him so clearly. He saved me in the Duskbar wildfire last year." Senna nodded, her gaze following Eirik as he tried to stand and look at Ilan. "Yes, this is Eirik. He never leaves anyone behind." Ilan stepped forward, bent down, and placed his hand on Eirik's head, as if trying to give strength to his old companion. "I thought he was gone when I heard about the landslide." Eirik quietly lifted his eyes, giving Ilan's palm a gentle lick, as a silent greeting, a reaffirmation of their unbreakable bond. The memories of that day flooded Ilan's mind. A scorching hot day during the wildfire, smoke everywhere, the fierce flames consuming everything. In the panic, when he was trapped in the sea of fire, Eirik had found him, using his nose and intelligence to guide him to safety, pulling him away from death. Senna stood beside, her eyes filled with tears as she listened to Ilan's story. She understood that every act of heroism like that wasn't just a mission. It was an invisible thread that connected souls who had gone through pain and danger together. The other members of the rescue team slowly gathered around, listening to the story. They didn't just admire the dog, but felt the strength of friendship and loyalty that transcended all boundaries. One of the team members, Lena, spoke up. "Eirik is not just a rescue dog. He is a symbol of perseverance and courage." Senna smiled, glancing at Eirik, her voice soft yet resolute. He is the friend, the companion who has walked with me through the darkest paths. In the eyes of everyone around, Eric was no longer the frail, injured old dog, but a great warrior, a dog who had faced death to save his comrades and those in need. Suddenly, the door to the clinic swung open. An elderly man with silver hair stepped in, looking at Senna and Ilan with familiar eyes. "Senna, Ilan," he said warmly, "I've heard about you. Eric's story has inspired many people." He was Colonel Harlan, a former rescue team commander who had led the Dusk Bar mission. He looked at Eric with a kind smile and said, "This dog is the pride of our team, and I'm glad to see him still with you." Senna felt her heart warm. The appearance of Colonel Harlan confirmed that everything she and Eric had gone through had not been in vain. The older man stepped forward, placing a hand on both Senna and Ilan's shoulders. "We need unity, the strength of a team, to overcome the challenges ahead, and Eric is the inspiration for all of us." Senna looked around the room, seeing the eyes of everyone filled with renewed trust and hope. She knew the journey ahead would be long and full of challenges, but with people and a dog like this, she believed that anything good could still happen. Eric, though weak, still gazed directly at Senna, as if saying, "I'm still here, with you." Senna smiled softly, gently stroking his fur, her heart filled with strength. "We won't give up," she said. "Not ever." Outside the window, the rain had stopped. The weak sunlight filtered through the gaps in the leaves, illuminating the room, awakening new dreams and unwavering determination. The small clinic in Brimridge seemed to bear the weight of time and untold stories. The yellow light cast a soft glow on the table where Senna sat across from Dr. Mile Orvin, the veterinarian she had never fully understood. Dr. Mail looked at Senna with an expression of doubt and hesitation. The stories of K9 dogs, of Eric's loyalty and bravery, seemed too far-fetched for him. He asked thoughtfully, "Are you sure about everything you've just said? A dog saving lives, facing danger time and again, and refusing safety?" Senna didn't hesitate. She sighed and began to speak. "Eric is not an ordinary dog, Doctor. He was my partner in the Duskbar Forest Rescue Team. We faced raging wildfires, blizzards, and wildernesses where few dared to tread." She looked deep into Dr. Mail's eyes, seeing both surprise and doubt there. But she didn't give up. 3 times, in different missions, Eric could have saved himself by retreating. But he chose to stay, to hold the line, searching for children trapped in the fire, in the snow, in the chaos. He didn't just follow orders, he followed his heart. Dr. Mail was silent, his gaze drawn into a depth he hadn't touched before. Senna continued, telling the story of the first time, when Eric led her to a group of children trapped in a cave about to collapse. Everyone thought they were lost, but Eric persevered, using his nose to find a way out, despite the danger of the terrain and the toxic smoke. "The second time," she said, "was when the fire was getting higher, and everyone was starting to retreat. But Eric stayed, guiding an injured, slow child out of the burning zone." The story weighed heavily on the room, not from sorrow, but from quiet admiration. Dr. Mile began to reconsider. "And the third time," Senna continued, "he refused to get in the ambulance with me, insisting on going back into the forest to search for another missing girl. He tore a hole in the medical bag to escape and continue his mission." Tears streamed down Senna's face, not just from the painful memories, but from the unwavering commitment between her and Eric. Dr. Mael remained silent for a long time, then sighed, his expression much softer. "I'm sorry for doubting. Stories like these, not everyone can believe them right away." Senna nodded, offering a gentle smile. "I know. But Eric doesn't need that belief for himself. He's proven it through his actions. She stood up and walked over to the cage where Eric lay. He looked up at her, his eyes still bright as if he had never been weak. Senna gently patted his head, as if giving strength to her old companion. Dr. Mile walked over, looking at Eric with deep respect. I will do everything I can to treat him, not just because it's my duty, but out of respect for everything he's done. Senna felt her heart lighten. This wasn't the end, but a new beginning for Eric, a journey of recovery not just physically, but spiritually. The atmosphere in the clinic softened, the sound of the rain outside fading, replaced by warm voices and promises of support. The sunlight filtered through the window, casting its rays on Eric's silver-gray fur, like a small halo amid the trials and suffering. Senna sat beside the dog, her heart full of hope. The small clinic was quiet after the promises and commitments. The soft yellow light from the overhead lamp gently touched the ground, softening the scars on Eric's silver-gray coat. The old dog lay still, breathing heavily, his eyes occasionally closing as if drifting into a peaceful sleep. Senna sat beside him, her hand gently placed on his back, stroking his fur. Her voice whispered, "Rest easy, my friend. Everything will be better." Time seemed to slow in that room, each second stretching endlessly. Eric's steady breathing became a small heartbeat in the quiet space. The rain outside had stopped, leaving only the soft sound of the wind rustling through the leaves. Then, suddenly, Eric opened his eyes wide, his gaze brightening like a flash of lightning in the dark. He growled softly, a hoarse, weak sound, but one filled with undeniable strength. Senna looked up, startled by the sudden movement. She took his paw, gently urging, "Come on, Eric, show us what it is." Eric sprang up, his injured leg straining as he moved toward the corner of the room. Senna followed closely, her heart racing not just with worry for him, but with curiosity about his strange behavior. Everyone in the room stood frozen, no one speaking, just watching closely as Eric moved. In the corner of the room, under the weak light, there was a small bookshelf with some medical supplies. Eric approached it, lightly scratching a piece of cardboard leaning against it. Beneath, there was a small, torn bag. Senna bent down and picked it up, her hand trembling slightly. She opened the bag, finding some papers, seemingly notes or documents, along with an old photograph. She picked up the photograph, the light shining through it to reveal the face of a young girl with a bright, innocent smile. Likely the girl they had been searching for. Eric's growl became stronger, filled with authority, as if warning of something important only Senna and their companions could understand. Senna knew that this dog wasn't merely a patient recovering. He was the keeper of memories, the messenger of hope, the guiding light for souls lost in the dark. Everyone looked at each other, the atmosphere tense but also filled with trust and resolve. They understood that this was a pivotal moment, a turning point in the journey to uncover the truth and rescue those still missing. Senna lifted the photo, meeting the eyes of everyone in the room. "We have a clue, and Eric has warned us." The growl echoed like a call to action. Everyone quickly prepared, ready for the next steps. The light in the room flickered from the flashlight on the table, highlighting the determination in Senna's eyes and the vitality in Eric's gaze. The light from the flashlight cast glimmering streaks on the wooden floor of the Brimridge Clinic. The air inside still held the tension from Eric's last growl, a silent warning. Senna stood up, her eyes lingering on the photograph of the girl. This precious clue in their search. A light electric charge ran through her, and her faith was reignited. Suddenly, Eric turned around, stepping toward a corner of the room behind the clinic. He placed his front paws on the wooden ledge and scratched fiercely at it, the sound of his claws scraping echoing in the stillness. Senna and the others jumped, their attention snapped to the noise. The atmosphere shifted from indifference to alertness. A strange, unpleasant smell began to spread, the scent of gas leaking from a small crack in the old wooden wall. Dr. Mayle, who had previously doubted Senna and Eric's story, now stood up in alarm, looking around the room with panic in his eyes. "There's gas!" he exclaimed. Immediately, the clinic became a flurry of activity. People rushed to the door, scrambling but fully aware of the danger. Senna clutched Eric tightly, shouting, "Out, everyone! The clinic could explode!" No one hesitated. The medical staff, rescue team members, and patients in the waiting room all rushed outside, leaving the quiet room but filled with imminent danger. Senna looked at Eric, who stood firm, his eyes resolute, like a soldier who would never back down. "You truly are our hero," she said, her voice soft but filled with pride. Outside the clinic, everyone gathered, their gazes fixed on the closed door. The rain still fell softly, like tears blending with the anxiety in everyone's hearts. A few people called authorities, while others tried to reassure each other. But no one forgot the amazed looks they gave the old dog's bravery and instinctive warning. As they waited, Senna shared with everyone the arduous journey they had just endured, about how Eric had persistently led her through the deep forests, over rocky ravines, and through torrential rainstorms. Her voice ignited a spark of faith. Not all important things are said in words. Sometimes we need to listen to the scratches, the growls, the smallest signs to recognize danger and hope. Time seemed to stop as the rescue team and clinic staff prepared their equipment to check and repair the gas leak. All eyes remained fixed on Eric, the dog who had not only saved the missing girl, but also saved the clinic from disaster. Senna sat next to Eric, her heart filled with warmth and gratitude. Amidst the challenges, they had found light, the light of courage, loyalty, and unspoken love. The sound of rain outside still fell steadily, like the heartbeat of a resilient heart that refuses to surrender. The soft glow of the evening light illuminated Senna's face, shimmering with the raindrops still clinging to her hair and cheeks. She knew the journey ahead would be long, but now she no longer walked alone. The small Brimridge clinic still carried the scent of rain and damp earth from the hasty opening and closing of doors. The room was quieter than ever after the chaos caused by the gas leak and the hurried evacuation of everyone. In the midst of this silence, all eyes turned to one person, the person who had been skeptical and harsh about Senna and the old dog's story, Dr. Mayle Orvin. He stood, trembling, beside Eric's cage. The old dog lay still, his breathing weak but his eyes bright, gazing up at the man slowly kneeling before him. In that moment, Dr. Mayle was no longer just a strict doctor, but a man with a heart full of emotion. He lowered his head, using his hand to wipe the bloodstains from the dog's muzzle, his sigh blending with Eric's heavy breaths. He whispered, his voice choked, "I'm sorry, Eric. I didn't trust you. I doubted. I'm sorry for that." No one in the room spoke. Only silent tears fell, pooling on the old wooden floor, like the marks of a profound transformation. Senna stood beside him, her heart melting with emotion. She saw in Dr. Mayle's eyes a change, from the distant, cold doctor to someone gentle and full of compassion. "I've seen many people come and go," he continued, "but I've rarely met a warrior like you, someone who doesn't just fight for life, but fights with their heart and soul." Eric gently licked his hand, as if offering forgiveness and a warm greeting to his old comrade. Suddenly, Senna remembered the early days when they first entered the forest together. through snowstorms and sleepless nights by the flickering firelight. She remembered how Eric had always been ready to charge into danger, without command, simply because he trusted in his necessity. He didn't need orders to know what to do, Senna said to everyone present. Eric is living proof of courage and unwavering loyalty. He's a hero, not just for me, but for everyone who has ever believed in the strength of love and perseverance. The whole room suddenly seemed to fill with warmth, the tears drying up, replaced by gentle smiles, smiles of gratitude and respect. Dr. Mael stood up, looking at Senna and the rescue team. I'll do everything I can to help Eric recover, not just because it's my duty, but because of the shining example he's shown us. Senna nodded, her eyes full of trust and hope. Eric slowly raised his head, wagging his tail lightly. A small gesture, but enough for everyone to feel the fire of life still burning in the old dog. In that moment, in the small clinic, among those with so many challenges and struggles, a promise was made. A promise of life, of courage, and of unconditional love. The evening light gradually faded from the clinic window, leaving behind soft shadows, not dark, but filled with hopes and new light. Outside the veterinary clinic window, the raindrops continued to fall softly, creating a thin mist like a watercolor painting. Under the faint yellow light, a young boy stood silently, his eyes fixed on the cage where Eric lay. The boy didn't speak, just stood there, silently, like a part of the night's painting, his eyes clear, full of hope and gratitude. Senna recognized those eyes, and a wave of warmth surged in her heart. That's the boy Eric saved 3 years ago, she whispered to Dr. Mile beside her. The child we've been following for so long. A few town residents, who had heard the story of the brave canine dog, began to gather outside the clinic. They shared memories, stories of Eric and Senna, about their unbreakable friendship and loyalty through every trial. The elderly news vendor on the corner recounted how he saw Eric rescue a child from the wildfire. The elderly cafe owner mentioned how Eric had tirelessly led the way through snowstorms to bring missing people to safety. The stories spread like a symphony, resonating through the streets, rekindling hope and belief in everyone's hearts. The boy outside the window, named Luke, finally entered the clinic. His eyes met Eric's, and a gentle smile spread across his face. "You saved me," Luke said, his voice trembling but full of reverence. "I can never forget that." Eric, though weak, lifted his head, his gaze warm, as if offering a silent response. Senna stepped forward, embracing Luke, and their eyes spoke volumes, a deep gratitude, an unspoken bond between human and animal. In that moment, it wasn't just the saving of a life, but a friendship that had withstood the test of time and hardship. The people of Brimridge, through Senna and Eric's story, began to reconsider the value of loyalty and the strength of resilient hearts. Senna knew their journey wasn't over, but the light from this story would illuminate the road ahead. Outside, the rain had stopped. Weak sunlight filtered through the leaves, shining down on the faces of Luke and the old dog, like a promise for a brighter tomorrow. A mild golden sun bathed the town of Brimridge, the light filtering through the tall trees and casting dancing patches of light on the red dirt road. Inside the small veterinary clinic, the wall behind the reception desk suddenly became the place to hold a special image. A photo of Eric, the German shepherd with a gentle gaze and an unyielding spirit, was hung proudly in an old yet sturdy wooden frame. Below the photo, a simple inscription was carved into a wooden plaque. Nameless hero, unwavering heart. Everyone in the clinic looked at the photo with reverence, feeling as though Eric's invisible presence was still enveloping the room. Senna stood beside, her eyes filled with humility and resolve. As the crowd began to applaud, she raised her hand to gently ask for silence. "Thank you all for coming today," Senna said softly, yet with strength. Eric never sought fame or praise. He only did what was right, no matter how difficult it was. She paused, looking toward the photo of her old companion, his eyes seeming to impart invisible strength to her. "And I don't need a medal, a title, or a grand ceremony," she continued with a clear voice. "I only have one wish. Starting today, this clinic will open its doors for free to all stray animals, those voiceless creatures with no shelter." A small silence spread through the room, followed by quiet sighs of relief, as if in agreement. Dr. Miles stepped forward, his voice warmer than ever before. "I will do everything in my power to make that a reality. This is not just a promise, it is a commitment. My clinic will be a safe place for all." The people in the room began to share Eric and Senna's story with those around them, spreading the spirit of love, responsibility, and compassion. Senna felt a deep joy, not from being honored, but because she and Eric had contributed to making something better for the community, a place where all creatures were treated with respect and love. Eric's photo on the wall became a guiding light, reminding everyone of the power of loyalty and unconditional friendship. That day, in the small room, the atmosphere was filled with warmth, humanity, and hope. The morning sunlight filtered through the clinic's window, shining on Eric's photo, like a promise of days ahead filled with love and kindness. After the photo of Eric was proudly hung in the Brimridge Veterinary Clinic, and the call to open doors for free to strays was made, the small town began to change, bit by bit, but with vibrancy and hope. Early in the morning, the small streets of Brimridge had changed significantly. People started bringing food, warm blankets, and small gifts to the clinic, not just for the pets, but for the strays, the small creatures with no voice. The looks that had once been indifferent now became tender and warm. Patting backs, kind words for Senna, and the clinic staff grew more frequent, like seeds of kindness sown in the heart of a town that once seemed barren. Senna often received packages from all over, boxes of pet food, soft blankets, and even encouraging notes in small, delicate cards. These gifts were carefully distributed to the animals being cared for in the forests or temporary shelters. One day, when Senna opened the door to her house, she found a basket hanging on the door with a special food package for Eric, a gift from a family that had just moved to Brimridge. Under the package was a small note. "Thank you, Eric, for teaching us how to love without conditions." A warm feeling filled Senna's heart. She knew she was not alone on this journey. The people of Brimridge also began organizing small gatherings, sharing the story of Eric and Senna. They didn't just talk about the heroics, but also passed on lessons about compassion, perseverance, and love between humans and animals. The children of Brimridge began to revere Eric as a true hero. They often stopped by, bringing small toys, scarves, and treats for the stray animals in the forest, learning how to care for and love from these real-life examples. Senna felt increasingly happy as she witnessed this change. She remembered the cold, dark nights when it was just her and Eric, battling challenges together. Now she knew she had awakened a part of Brimridge's heart, a part that should never go cold. One afternoon, when the last rays of sunlight fell on the roof of Senna's small wooden house, she received a call from the rescue team. They informed her that the community had provided support, both material and emotional, to expand their rescue operations and protect wildlife in the area. Senna smiled, looking at Eric lying beside her, their gazes meeting like a silent promise. No matter how the world changes, no matter how difficult the road, they would always be together, never giving up. The small town of Brimridge, through the small acts of those who never gave up, was slowly becoming warmer and better with each passing day. The evening light bathed the sky in golden hues, with gentle winds rustling the leaves, as if singing a song of life and hope that would never fade. One autumn morning, when the leaves had turned yellow and orange and fell softly under the old pine tree, Senna sat by the window of her small wooden house by the forest. She sipped her hot tea, her gaze quietly looking out at the forests that remained a deep green despite the passing of time. The doorbell rang, pulling her back to the present. Senna stood up, opened the door, and found a postman holding an old letter, its envelope slightly wrinkled and the edges showing signs of water damage. "You have a letter from a loved one," the postman said, his eyes gentle, as if understanding the untold story. Senna took the letter, a flutter of something moving in her chest. She stepped inside and carefully tore open the envelope. The letter was written in soft, familiar handwriting, filled with heartfelt emotion. It was from the mother of Adeline, the young girl who had gone missing and whom Senna and Eric had rescued. Senna sat down, reading each line as if listening to a whisper from afar. In the letter, the mother expressed deep gratitude to Senna and Eric, angels without armor, but with hearts braver than anyone else. She shared the hardships they had faced afterward, the fear, and the overwhelming relief when her daughter had returned safely. The most touching part of the letter was a drawing attached to it, a crude sketch by Adeline, showing a German shepherd standing proudly beside a small girl, beneath a bright sun and a deep blue sky. The dog in the drawing didn't need armor or heavy gear, just bright eyes and silver-gray fur. But to Senna, that drawing said everything. It was the image of a hero, a loyal friend who would never abandon. Senna felt a warmth spread in her heart, as if a gentle fire had been kindled from the first days she stepped into the deep forest, battling challenges with Eric. She placed the drawing on the wall, next to Eric's photo in the clinic. 2 images side by side, a silent reminder of the power of friendship, courage, and kindness. Senna gently stroked the drawing, whispering, "You are the hero of this little girl, of me, and so many others. No need for armor, just your heart and resilience." Under the fading evening light, the drawing and the photo seemed to merge together, creating a scene full of warmth and hope. That day, Senna realized that the small actions, the decisions to never give up, to never surrender to hardship, could create miracles beyond imagination. The letter was not just a thank you. It was a powerful reminder for her to continue the journey, not just for herself, but for all those voiceless creatures. The brilliant sunset stretched across the Brimridge sky, casting light on the small drawing on the wall and reigniting the flame of hope in Senna's heart. The next morning, soft sunlight stretched across the small hill behind Senna's wooden house. The golden rays filtered through the leaves, coloring the wild chrysanthemums blooming brightly, creating a vibrant, living canvas. Eric stood there, his legs still weak but growing stronger each day. The old dog, after battling pain and injury, was now taking his first steps outside in the peaceful, sunlit air. Senna stood beside him, her eyes filled with joy and pride. She gently called to Eric with a soft voice, "Come on, Eric, just one step at a time." The dog shivered slightly, then placed one foot on the soft ground of the backyard. Senna held his head gently, stroking his weathered fur as if offering strength. Each step Eric took was significant, not just the recovery of a creature, but a symbol of the unyielding will that refused to be broken by adversity. The wild chrysanthemums surrounding the yard seemed to celebrate, their scent blending with the fresh morning air, creating a symphony of nature and life. Senna remembered the difficult days that had passed, Endless rainstorms, cold nights in the deep forest, Eric's final growl as a vow that could never be forgotten. Now, as she watched the dog stand firm on his own feet, she knew that all their efforts had been rewarded. The people of Brimridge began to take notice of Eric's miraculous recovery. They frequently stopped by, bringing small gifts, nutritious food, soft blankets, to support the dog and Senna. Every inquiry, every warm glance was like an invaluable encouragement. Senna and Eric walked together along the narrow path around the house, between fields of chrysanthemums and rows of lush green trees. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting shimmering streaks of light on the earth beneath. Eric wagged his tail, breathing in the fresh air, as if savoring a new life that had just begun. She spoke softly to Eric. "You've won, my friend, and we will have many more days like this under the light of hope and love." Eric licked her hand gently, as if responding to that promise. Despite his age and the wounds that hadn't fully healed, in his eyes still burned the fire of spirit and an unwavering resolve. The backyard became a sanctuary, a peaceful place after the storms. Senna knew that every day, every step Eric took was a small victory, but one more valuable than any treasure. The warm sunlight, the gentle fragrance of chrysanthemums, and the soft breeze all seemed to sing a song of life and unyielding faith. Senna stood quietly, watching Eric run around the garden, her heart filled with hope for a brighter future, a day of true light. The morning gently blanketed the Brimridge forest like a soft velvet blanket. The pale pink dawn light filtered through the leaves, creating shimmering streaks that danced on the damp earth. The air was fresh, cool, and full of life, as if welcoming a new chapter in their lives. Senna and Eric walked slowly along the familiar trail, the path where they first met, beginning a journey that had lasted for years, facing countless challenges together. But today, it wasn't about finding someone or rescuing anyone. It was simply to be, just to be in this peaceful moment, in the bond and the living spirit of a friendship that could never fade. The gentle breeze carried the scent of the forest earth, of wild flowers, the fragrance Senna had known since childhood. She looked at Eric, the old dog with silver-gray fur, his eyes still bright, full of fighting spirit and loyalty. Eric walked beside her, occasionally sniffing a special scent, then shaking his head gently, as if to confirm, "I'm still here, still with you." Senna smiled softly, speaking gently. "We've been through so many seasons, so many dangerous paths. But today, we just need to enjoy this moment." The light filtered through the treetops, casting shadows on the green leaves, creating a living watercolor of light and dark. The chirping of birds, the soft rustling of leaves underfoot. Everything merged into a harmonious melody of nature. They stopped by a small stream, the water gurgling over smooth stones. Senna bent down, scooping some water for Eric to drink. The old dog lapped up the clear water, as if gaining strength for his recovering body. She sat down by the stream, her hand gently stroking Eric's soft fur, her heart full of unspeakable emotions. Memories flooded back, the first time they met, the long days in the deep forest, the quiet rescues that were filled with meaning. "You're not just a dog, you're my friend, my teammate," Senna said, her gaze wistful and proud. Eric turned his head, looking at her, as if understanding everything unspoken. They continued walking, along the forest paths, slowly and leisurely, savoring the peaceful space and their deep connection. Every step was a story, every breath a promise never to part. Senna knew this might be the last patrol they'd take together, not because of fading strength, but because life was unfolding new chapters, new paths to walk. But she didn't feel sadness or regret, because every day, every moment spent with Eric was an invaluable gift, proof of the strength of loyalty, courage, and unconditional love. Under the gentle morning sunlight, they walked through the forests, across open skies, and through fields of wildflowers bursting with color, images full of life, filling their hearts and souls. The shadows of the two of them grew smaller on the trail, the morning light shining on them like a reminder of the journey behind and the miracles of friendship. The peaceful afternoon stretched over the town of Brimridge, the golden sunlight streaming through the treetops, casting shimmering patches on the earth like drops of sweet honey from nature. The gentle breeze flowed through the windows of the small veterinary clinic, carrying the scent of dry leaves and wild grass, creating a space of peace and vitality. Outside the clinic, on the weathered wooden wall, the people of Brimridge together engraved a simple yet warm inscription. In Brimridge, no one is judged by the dust on their clothes. Senna stood next to the wall, her eyes filled with contentment and tranquility. Her gaze was fixed on Eric, the old dog lying with his head resting on the doorstep, his eyes soft and serene as if he were welcoming the beautiful things in life. She smiled gently, her heart warmer than ever before. Every step, every moment that had passed, from the dark days, the relentless rains, to the moments of light, had woven their story. A story not just of survival, but of friendship, loyalty, and change. The people of Brimridge, with each passing day, with every small story shared about Eirik and Senna, had learned to see themselves and one another through eyes of love, without judgment. A soft bark echoed from Eirik, simple in sound, but filled with immeasurable strength. Senna looked at the dog, as if listening to the whisper of her companion. "We've been through so many trials, but in the end, love and courage always prevail." The children in the town, the elderly, the people passing through the clinic, all felt this through Senna's story, through the gaze of Eirik, through his bark. Senna bent down, placing her hand gently on Eric's head, stroking him slowly. He stretched lightly, as if wanting to feel the love radiating from her. The evening light bathed them, creating a peaceful yet vibrant scene, an ending that was complete, yet a beginning for the stories to come of human connection and sharing. Senna knew that, while this story had reached its conclusion, the values it carried would live on in each person's heart, a promise kept, never fading. The story of Senna and Eric wasn't just the journey of one person and a brave German shepherd overcoming trials, but a vivid testament to the power of love and perseverance. The German shepherd, with intelligence, loyalty, and remarkable responsibility, had become a loyal companion, ready to sacrifice to protect and save humans. Through every step, every bark, Eirik had inspired dedication and heartfelt emotions, transcending all hardships, becoming a symbol of courage and silent sacrifice. The story also evokes in each of us compassion and gratitude for the creatures who silently stand by, helping humans without asking for anything in return except unconditional love. It is a profound reminder of our responsibility to protect and care for our companions, and a valuable lesson in patience, kindness, and the strength of genuine connections between humans and animals. Senna and Eric have proven that it's not the spotlight or accolades that make a hero, but rather the small, persistent actions every day, driven by a heart full of love and an unwavering belief in life. Their story serves as an inspiration for each of us to live kinder, more appreciative, and braver lives on our own journeys. Let us love and cherish our four-legged friends, for in each glance, each step they take, there is a world of loyalty and silent devotion, the most beautiful gifts life has to offer.